Okay, so first of all, it seems that my chihuahua is determined to eat her weight in dog biscuits, so I'm not going to sit here for the next 10 minutes waiting for her to finish. So you will hear that noise in the background. Apologies for that. Now, this case from day one, it seemed like the writing was on the wall. The first thing I saw in this case that was a red flag was one of Daniel's interviews. And that's what drew me in. Straight away, I was looking at it and I was sitting there thinking, no, this is all wrong. I did not trust him from day one. And then when I started looking at those early photos of Lily and Jack that we saw, there were even more red flags that I saw. And I was really unpopular at first because there were a lot of people who fiercely supported Daniel and kept putting this whole narrative of, look, Malaya ran off. He didn't, he's the hero here. So me speaking negatively about him was a source of much annoyance to many people. And then we get the Durwood story. And, you know, I would have liked that to be real. As ridiculous and unconvincing and unrealistic as it sounded, the notion that these kids were still alive somewhere was very appealing, even though I knew it was not the truth. I've shared my beliefs without a filter with my members in a video quite early on in this case. If you remember, you may have seen that and you know where I'm coming from with this. But I've been careful not to push my beliefs too much, although I think most people realise that my number one suspect here is Daniel. So why am I yabbering on at the moment about all this? Well, as you are probably aware, there is a new article that has come out from a Canadian newspaper called The Globe and Mail. Having checked behind the scenes with one of my Canadian subscribers in terms of how credible this newspaper is, I've been told that not only is it quite credible and well regarded, but it is also part of a thing called the Trust Project, which is all about ethical and truthful reporting. And on a side note, you've probably heard me mention before my bird that mimics, and I believed it was a minor bird. Well, I've just discovered that my Rosella, who spends a lot of time sitting directly outside my window watching me while I'm working, is actually the mimic. He's just been doing his alarm clock impersonation. So, wow, who knew? I guess it makes sense if you are familiar with budgies, budgerigars. They also are really good at mimicking, and I know a lot of people who have pet budgies and they teach them to talk. Okay, so apologies for all the interruptions from my canine and avian friends. Let's just get back to discussing what we're supposed to be discussing. So, there was an article that came out, a really lengthy article that came out from the Globe and Mail, which covers a lot of information that I didn't know in this case. So I'm going to go through that article today. This could be a lengthy video because the article itself is quite a lengthy article. I've put it into reader view so that you can see what I'm reading. In terms of if you wanted a copy of the article, because I know that some people do like to get copies of things like this, I'll drop it into my Patreon for anyone who wants a copy. It'll only be the reader view version, but I will do that for you. Now, if you are not familiar with my Patreon is free to join. You only need an email address, and basically you go in and you join using your email address. Then any documents that I upload on my Patreon are free for you to upload. There are multiple documents there with relating to the Maddie Soto case. I will be uploading more documents from Maddie's case. now that it's resolved, there's a lot of documents that I have that I need to upload for people so that anyone who wants them can grab them. There are some documents from the Morphew case, Suzanne Morphew, and I will be uploading the relevant documents from the Coburger case. I know I said I would do that. I realised last night I still haven't done so. So there is a range of documents from different cases there on my Patreon for you to access. Like I said, it is free to join and all the documents are free. If you wish to support my channel, there is a $1 tier and a $2 tier that you can join, but that is certainly not something that is necessary to be able to get documents that have been provided. I do have reader view versions of other articles that I've saved over this case. So if you want me to upload them to Patreon also, just leave a comment below, let me know, and I'll do that for you. And since we're on the topic, this is not something that I tend to mention very often, but there is a membership option for my channel. I try to upload videos on a semi-regular basis. I need to get better at doing that, but there are quite often exclusive videos where I discuss cases in a less formal way, where I share my opinions or I share unverified information. So if you're a member, you may have come across my most recent members video discussing the Jaden Spicer case, which, as you've seen, I need to do a public video about that now because that information is now publicly available, as well as having membership options should you wish. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee, which is linked down below, and that is basically another way that you can support my channel just to help me to be able to continue with what I'm doing. Right now there's a number of FOIA requests that I would like to be able to access, but unfortunately they're beyond my means financially. I've been trying to get hold of audio for the Phoebe Bishop case, and just for one audio from Kieran Middlehouse, that's going to cost me $50. So if I want to get the audio from Wood and Bromley as well, I'm looking at upwards of $150. Transcripts, forget it. Turns out that apparently in Australia they get around this whole freedom of information thing by making it just completely unaffordable for you to access transcripts even. Things which, as you've seen in America, many courthouses you can just go straight into the courthouse, go into their dockets, and bam, you can access those transcripts for free. Anyway, enough yabbering from me. Let's jump in and have a look at this article. Months after Nova Scotia children vanished, a clearer picture emerges of their lives before their disappearance. So the journalist who wrote this is Darren Calabrese, and this is the Globe and Mail. Months later, there are still few answers about what happened to Jack and Lily Sullivan of Nova Scotia. But trauma and stigma have left their families and community further apart. I have to say, the reason that I had to check with one of my subscribers that this was a decent newspaper was because I have not seen this sort of journalism in a very, very long time. This guy has spent a lot of time working on this article. Deep in the middle of Nova Scotia, far from its quaint coastal towns, sits Lansdowne, a hamlet of around 100 people in a cellular dead zone. Well, that fits in with the video I put out yesterday, doesn't it? It's surrounded by endless spruce forests, bushes like razor wire, and bogs that breed swarms of black flies. Like many faded settlements across the Maritimes, Lansdowne reached its peak more than a century ago, about 150 kilometres northwest of Halifax, It was once a busy railway stop bustling with Scottish immigrants who dug iron and copper mines deep into the hillsides. Today, those mine shafts are abandoned. One lone train a day cuts through the community with a melancholic blare. Honestly, if I was Canadian and I was interested in, local news, etc., other than just wanting information on this case and potentially other cases that I may follow in future, I would certainly subscribe to this newspaper, because this kind of journalism, I thought it was dead. Most of the people here live a quiet rural existence in secluded homes, scattered along backcountry roads that only the locals know, where chickens and large dogs roam free and the rusted skeletons of old vehicles sit marooned in the dirt, which very much describes their property. Much like American Appalachia, this once prosperous corner of Pictou County is now economically stagnant. 1 in 5 children live in poverty. That's huge. Higher than most other counties in the province. It's here where the lives of Lily and Jack Sullivan were implanted 2 years ago to a rundown trailer set back from Highway 289 with their pregnant mother and stepfather. They needed a place to live, and their step-grandmother, who owned the home, welcomed them to live with her. I think he's being a little bit over-generous there, saying that she welcomed them to live with her. I will be doing another video shortly where I play some more of her audio discussing Malaya, and it's pretty clear that from day one, Malaya was not welcome on the property. She did not like Malaya at all from the very beginning. Life for Lily 6 and Jack 4 inside the cluttered trailer in Lansdowne was chaotic. There were holes in the floor of the front stoop, tarps to protect the underside of the trailer from the elements, and so much racket from the lively children that their step-grandmother soon retreated to a camper in the driveway. Well, yeah, she's made it clear that she did not like Lily and Jack from the get-go because they were too loud. This is a woman who was supposedly in tears over them being missing. I actually find it offensive, her being referred to as a step-grandmother. She was in no way whatsoever a grandmother to these children, and I think it is actually a major insult to Belinda and probably Cindy. I don't know enough about Cindy, but it is certainly a major insult to Belinda to be referring to this woman as a step-grandmother. Interesting to hear about the tarps under the trailer to protect it from the elements. Sounds like this was not an ideal place for children to be growing up. Their stepfather, Daniel Martell, 34, with pale eyes and ropey arms, worked at the local hardwood mill. Their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, 27, a member of the, I can't say it, First Nation with chin-length dark hair, stayed home with their baby Meadow. Sorry, I don't even want to try and butcher it because I don't want to be offensive. That said, if someone can write it for me phonetically in the comments section of this video, that would be greatly appreciated, and I will make a note of it so that in future I can do my best to pronounce it. Inside the mobile home, a large wood stove filled up most of the living room. The kids' artwork was pasted to the kitchen wall next to the sliding patio door that led to a yard where they spent hours playing next to the chicken coop. Lily chatted away to her dolls and stuffed animals. Jack turned over rocks and pieces of wood in search of bugs and worms. Outside the fenced backyard and up over a steep embankment, the children sometimes played in a small fort nestled beneath boughs of spruce. It was like their own little dream world. Most days, Jack and Lily hopped on the bus to attend Salt Springs Elementary, a rural school about a 20-minute ride from their home. Jack, smaller than his peers, was strapped in at the front of the bus next to his sister. The morning the children were reported missing, the big yellow school bus rolled past the mobile home without stopping for a second day in a row. Jack and Lily were usually standing by the side of the road waiting to be picked up. But earlier that morning of May 2nd, their mother had marked them absent from school at about 6:15 a.m. Both parents have said it was because Lily had a cough. Now, I'd heard comments about this from people, and this is the first time I've seen this confirmed. Like I said, this is a reputable newspaper, so I'm guessing he's done his research and he's made sure that this is correct. I hope he's done his research and he's not just going by conversations on Facebook and on that other channel that seems to have everybody on. But here's the thing. If she was marked absent from school at 6:15 because of a cough, that means that Malaya had to have gotten up, had to have seen Lily to confirm that she was still not well enough to go to school. Now, if you've got young children and you've gotten up because you've confirmed that you've needed to confirm that they can't go to school, you've gone online, you've marked them absent, you've also got this little 18-month-old baby. Are you really going to go back to bed and go to sleep? And why is it that she's claiming that the last time she saw them was the night before when they were in their bed? Because surely, if your child had a cough, wouldn't you just check first before marking them absent from school, rather than just keep them home another day? I mean, yeah, some parents might just go, well, it's the weekend, they might as well have Friday off and then go back on Monday feeling better. But this is a family with 3 young children under the age of 6. Do you really think that if there was any chance of sending them to school and having a bit of peace with only her and Meadow, that Malaya wouldn't have jumped at that? So straight up, this suggests to me that where we are speculating that something happened to these children the night before, we are probably correct. Otherwise, why is Malaya saying that last time she saw them was the night before, and yet she got up and marked them absent from school? They say they heard the children playing in the next room while they dozed in the bedroom with their toddler. Daniel has said he saw Lily pop in and out a few times. At about 9:40 a.m, the couple says they awoke and realised the kids were gone. Now, I'm wondering how he got onto that time, 9:40 a.m. Is that simply by the whole deduction thing of one of them saying, well, you know, we searched for about 20 minutes and then we realised they'd only been gone about 20 minutes before we called 911, or whatever the story was? Or has he heard this directly from one of them? Because the original story that was given to the RCMP was that the last time they were aware that the kids were around was 8 o'clock that morning. This is, I believe, the first time that we've seen the timeline actually given in terms of matching up with when the RCMP were called. Although I do want to point out that, according to Malaya, she rang them immediately when she realised, meaning that she should have been ringing them at 9:40, not 10 a.m. The next thing we knew, it was quiet, she told CTV Atlantic. We get up and I tell my partner Daniel, do you hear the kids? And he says, no. Instantly we're looking outside and we're looking everywhere, yelling for them. So even that bit, instantly we're looking outside. So she's saying they didn't look anywhere in the house first. And yet she claims that they can't actually hear that sliding door. But like I said in a previous video, you know, parallel universes, because at the same time she was instantly calling the Mounties to say, we're missing our children. Jack and Lily's mysterious disappearance has baffled the country. More than 3 months after they were reported missing after one of the largest searches in Nova Scotia's history and an intensive police investigation, police still haven't confirmed the circumstances of how the young siblings went missing. It's possible that there were clues, even potential warning signs in their home life. A closer look into the lives of Jack and Lily shows that all was not well in the trailer in Lansdowne. Wow, so that's just basically setting the scene. That's it, not even before they get into the nuts and bolts of the story. This guy has really done a thorough job with this whole story. That morning, Jack's blue dinosaur boots were gone. So were Lily's pink rubber boots and her white backpack with strawberries. The only clue left behind, according to the parents, was one child-sized boot print in the dirt driveway, a few metres from the home. Can we just acknowledge here that in his interviews, Daniel claimed that there were 2 boot prints side by side. So it seems that whoever was responsible for the task of adding those boot prints messed up and forgot to put the second boot print, or someone walked over it and smudged it out. And now we are told that there was only one. Or maybe in their parallel universe there were 2 boot prints. A bit like in Back to the Future when you start off with Twin Pines Mole and then later on it becomes Lone Pine Mole. Malaya called 911 at about 10 a.m. Daniel said he jumped in her white SUV and left to check nearby roads, dirt roads, culverts and streams. We have streams added in there too. That's interesting. More references to waterways. Soon, an army of search and rescue volunteers arrived wearing orange hunting vests. They fanned out conducting a grid search in the swamp and thick woods around the home. Drones and a helicopter scowled overhead. A police dog on a leash with a handler set about the yard. Police combed every inch of the property. They rummaged through the mobile home, reached inside a hamster cage, tore apart a brush pile, unzipped the suitcase lying in the middle of the yard. They opened the top of the dryer at the end of the driveway and peered in the chicken hut. They searched the camper van where Daniel's mother Janie Mackenzie lives 3 times. As brilliant as his writing is, he missed a comma there. Sorry, I am a grammar Nazi in case you hadn't guessed. I'm guessing that account has come directly from someone who was there at the time. I'm also guessing it probably has come directly from Janie because audio that I have has her grumbling about them checking her trailer 3 times. That morning, Malaya messaged the children's paternal grandmother, Belinda Gray. I never thought they would run off on me like that, she wrote. I'm so distraught. Hours later, and still no sign of the children, Malaya floated the idea that Jack and Lily were abducted. Many are suspecting they were picked up by somebody, she texted Belinda, because there's no trace of them or Lily's backpack. My heart absolutely breaks for what Belinda has gone through in the last 3 months because it seems that from the get-go, Malaya was lying to her as well. She's saying here many are suspecting they were picked up by somebody. That is classic persuasive language. She's not just saying, oh, well, we think they were. She's saying many are to make it sound even more credible. When in reality, the only people that were floating that idea were her and Daniel and supposedly, well, presumably, Daniel's mother and brother. And I'm going to add his uncle in there now too, because I do think that he was also involved, and I'll come back to that. But you can see that from day one, she was trying to set up the abduction narrative, and not just to authorities, but to the children's own grandmother. And I truly hope that someday when the truth of all this does finally come out, that Malaya actually bothers to apologise to those family members of these children who she lied to throughout this investigation and who she in some ways may have given false hope. I mean, honestly, if her and the children were living in a manipulative DV situation, I can understand initially her wanting to go along with the agreed narrative. But the moment she left that property, the moment she cut off all communication with him and his family, that's when she should have started talking, and that talking should have included family members like Belinda who genuinely care about what happened to these children. You have these people pushing a narrative to save someone's ass, someone who clearly never really gave a damn about these children, and in doing that, they're hurting other family members. Daniel, meanwhile, was tearing through the woods on foot and wading in streams. Again, we have this water reference. Telling people he was moving faster than the police helicopters. I love that this guy has thrown that bit in, because that is one of the most comical comments that we've heard throughout this case. That day, carloads of family members pulled up to help search. In the mid-afternoon, a non-encrypted radio channel crackled with voices of emergency responders. Families brought us to a location here, not far away, that there's a piece of a blanket which the mother says she believes belongs to her daughter, radioed an official. I'm going to have to go back through all the dispatch audio on Paula's channel to try and find that, because I don't recall specifically hearing that. Although that said, it is possible that I missed it, or it is possible that Paula might have missed it in editing all the dispatch audio, because she removed all the audio that wasn't relating to this case, and it's always possible that she might have removed one or two things without realising. At the same time, I think she's got 3 separate videos now that have got the audio in them, so it's easy to miss. If you have heard that audio and you can give me a timestamp and a link, let me know. Now, I'd be very interested to hear more details on this specific thing, because they're saying families brought them to the location where they found the piece of blanket, meaning it wasn't a searcher who found the blanket. Coincidentally, it just happened to be someone who was part of the family. And I would quite confidently put money on the fact that that someone happened to be from Daniel's side of the family, someone who was in the know about what happened to these children, as opposed to Cindy or someone who had arrived on that day. What is interesting here is that you have the mother saying she believed it belonged to her daughter. We know that Malaya didn't go out and do any searching, so it would appear that someone has found this bit of blanket, messaged her a picture of the blanket, or she's gone and looked at it herself because it was conveniently close to the home, and she's gone, yeah, that's the blanket. What I find interesting is the different stories that I've heard relating to this piece of blanket. So from what I've heard, this is only a piece of a blanket, and it says there specifically too, piece of a blanket. And then the story that we've heard from different sources is, one source is that the rest of the blanket was shoved into a rubbish bin, and another source says that the rest of the blanket was hanging over a railing. Interestingly enough, the source that is trying to have it shoved into the rubbish bin is the source that was working very hard to discredit Malaya, while the other source were people who were only there that day and who, as far as I am concerned, have less of a stake in telling lies. In other words, what have they got to gain by making up lies about the location of the blanket? Emergency responders dispatched a canine unit to the site where they seized Lily's pink blanket, torn and wound around the lower branches of a spruce. It was about 1 kilometre from the mobile home, off the gravel Lansdowne Road where Daniel's father and uncles live. The road runs deep into the backcountry, connecting with dirt roads that snake further into the wilderness to remote lakes, backwoods dumps, and clear-cut tracts of land. Ding, ding, ding. If you watched my video yesterday, that is in the direction of the area that I basically highlighted and said, this is where I think they should be searching. Now, logically, Lily would not have carried a blanket a kilometre all the way over towards Lansdowne Road. And I'm going to quickly show you a map. Now, for those of you who aren't metric, 1 kilometre is about 0.62 of a mile, to give you some idea of distance. That is a long way for a little girl to carry a blanket, or a piece of blanket even. Now, what you are looking at directly in front of you is an area that I basically highlighted in a video yesterday or the day before, where I was basically saying this is the direction I believe they should be searching. You have down towards the very bottom of the screen is the location of the property. Now, to get to that area that I've highlighted, you would have to go up a hill first. No 6-year-old is going to be carrying anything up a hill for any length of time. And within that area that I've highlighted, that solid road you can see, that is Lansdowne Road. So I find it very curious that that happens to be the location where they're saying they found a piece of blanket. And of course, it's also sus as F to learn that actually that's the direction where Daniel's father and uncles live. Meaning that is an area that Daniel would probably be extremely familiar with. We have those multiple phone calls that were made to Janie on the morning that the children went missing from her brother, who is presumably the same person that they are referring to. And you have this blanket discovered over on that road. I'm going to call it here and say that he is also involved in covering up with whatever happened. I wouldn't be surprised if he knows the location of those children, and I hope that he has been interviewed quite intensely by the RCMP. Given this bit of information, I'm really surprised that they've not gone all out searching that section. It also concerns me here that it talks about how that road runs deep into the backcountry, connecting with dirt roads that snake further into the wilderness to remote lakes, backwoods, dumps, and clear-cut tracts of land. Like I said, I still don't believe, I said this in a previous video, I don't believe that in terms of where those children were taken, that the individual who took them, and I suspect probably Daniel with help, I don't believe that they would have crossed any larger tracks, as in the Pipeline or Lansdowne Road, which is why I circled that area. But then when you read there, remote lakes, backwoods dumps, it certainly makes you question, particularly when we have them all on the go at 6:15 in the morning, when there probably weren't a lot of people around. And yes, I am now being quite forward in my accusations, because it seems pretty damn clear to me that we can see what has happened, we can see who was involved. So if any of these people who I am making these comments about wish to come after me, by all means, go for it. Come and prove your innocence. And for those of you who've been around my channel for some time, you know that these are things that I'm not going to say lightly. Okay, moving on. When a police officer asked Daniel about the pink blanket, he said it wasn't Lily's at first. Police began pounding on doors in the early hours of the next morning. They came to the door of Daniel's father, Earl Martell, a retired tyre plant worker who lives atop a hill in a bungalow he built himself 40 years ago. Officers peered with flashlights into the corners of his living room, jumbled with the craft supplies and Hot Wheels of Daniel's 2 school-aged biological children who often visit on weekends. Earl guided police into the yard, to old campers and a derelict log cabin filled with junk, and to Daniel's older model black sedan in need of repairs he couldn't afford. So this tells me that Daniel spends a lot of time with his father and that there is definitely a close connection here. The fact that Daniel's vehicle is there at his father's place as opposed to on his mother's property definitely gives us some inkling of the relationship there. Police also banged on the door of the home of Belinda in Middle Muscadaboit. Oh, sorry. Again, feel free to write that down in phonetics for me. I apologise to Belinda and any of her family if you are listening. I don't mean to sound so ignorant. That said, I'd imagine that if you were to look at some of our Aboriginal place names here in Australia, you might struggle with them. About half an hour from Lansdowne, they were looking to talk to her son, who had been living there for the last 9 months after losing his roofing job. But Cody Sullivan hadn't seen Jack and Lily since he and Malaya separated 3 years ago. He'd cut ties after she filed for full custody of the children. Over the coming days, police returned twice more to interrogate him and take photos of vehicles. So that says to me that from day one, they were treating this case as a criminal case. They did not believe the children had wandered off into the woods. They did not believe the children were abducted. They believed that there were people involved that had a direct connection to these children. Through the night, search and rescue volunteers combed the woods and helicopters and drones that can detect body heat scanned overhead. Malaya was up too, texting with Belinda. I have reason to believe they may have been taken by someone, she wrote. They should have found them by now if they were in the woods. And we all know that they weren't in the woods. And yes, she is 100% right. They should have found them pretty damn quickly if they were in the woods, especially when you consider the fact that they had drones there within a matter of hours of the children being reported missing. When you consider that at that time of year there were still overnight temperatures of 1 degree, 2 degrees, quite chilly, then in terms of ground heat and heat from foliage, that wouldn't have been so intense, meaning that these drones with their technology, their heat sensing technology, would have easily identified children if they were out there in those woods. And at the risk of being somewhat morbid, when you consider the number of helicopters and the number of drones that were flying over the area pretty early on, that certainly makes me lean towards something occurring on the Thursday afternoon or the Thursday night, because basically, in terms of body heat, there would be something being given off for at least 12 hours if those children were deceased. Although when I think about it, in actual fact, given their size, then yes, as morbid as this sounds, their bodies would have cooled faster than that, particularly given the cooler mornings. But that said, if those children were alive that morning and wandered off into those woods that morning, then the drones or the helicopters would have definitely picked up on their body heat. The next morning, Belinda set out to help search for her grandchildren. As she drove toward the trailer on Highway 289 past the trail of orange traffic cones, it hit her where she was headed. Over the last 2 years, Malaya had distanced herself from Belinda. She stopped bringing the children to visit, later explaining that Daniel was jealous and didn't want her going there or giving out the address. The grandmother said she had never been invited to the house. Until she showed up to help in the search, Belinda didn't know this was the home her grandchildren were living in. a home that she'd noticed multiple times on her way while driving to Halifax. Now, this stood out to me in a big way. This was like a big neon sign here. Her saying that Malaya stopped bringing the children to visit her roughly 2 years earlier, around the time when she moved in with Daniel on this property and with Daniel's mother, and saying that he was jealous and didn't want her going over there or giving out the address. This is a classic thing that you see in DV situations where the victim is gradually isolated from their support network. I've heard people criticising Belinda and saying, well, she's not a real grandmother because she didn't see the kids for 2 years. Well, in situations like this, it becomes extremely difficult when a person intentionally isolates themselves from family. What was Belinda supposed to do? Malaya didn't give her an address. Malaya had made it pretty clear that Daniel didn't like her seeing Malaya or the grandchildren. It's not an easy situation to be in. Now, this is a slightly different situation, but just to give you some perspective, my best friend from when I was 7 years old, we had been inseparable the whole time we were growing up, right into adulthood. And then in her mid-20s, she reconnected with a guy that we had both known as a teenager, and I, amongst many other people, had disliked him. He was a bit of an arrogant pig, and we were all in the same choir together, and very few people liked him because he was arrogant and narcissistic, and he had a nickname that many people used with regards to him. So when her and this guy connected, I was really surprised, and I thought, well, surely this relationship's going to end quickly because he is such a controlling, narcissistic jerk, and surely she's going to see how much of a horrible person he is. They ended up getting married and having 5 kids together. And from the time that their relationship became really serious, he didn't like me either. And he made it quite clear to her that she was not allowed to have any contact with me. And we tried a few times meeting for lunch at places. And the last time that I caught up with her, up until when her marriage finally ended about 5 or 6 years ago, the last time I caught up with her before I just turned around and walked away, we were at lunch and he rang her to check on her. And she lied to him and told him she was at lunch with one of her netball friends. And after that, I went, you are prepared to lie and hide the fact that you are having any contact with me whatsoever for the sake of this jerk. I can't fight that. So I walked away. We are, again, good friends. He's not on the scene anymore. I've not addressed the situation with her, but, we will always be best friends, regardless. But, I lost 15 years of time with my best friend because of this guy. So I can understand Belinda's situation. It would have been really, really hard for her, and it makes me sad when I hear people criticising her for something that was beyond her control. When someone is that controlling of their partner, nobody can make a difference. And they are going to do whatever it is that their partner tells them to do. I probably should mention my best friend that I'm talking about. We were always referred to as the terrible twins. From when we were about 7 right through until when I was starting uni and, we had other commitments in our lives, we were joined at the hip. Especially when we were younger, our holidays basically evolved around us being at each other's houses. We would spend time at one house and then there'd be like a swap over and we'd then head off to the other person's house so that I guess our parents were sharing the load. And this reference to us as being the terrible twins wasn't just because we both look like we could be twins and we used to dress the same, but because of how intensely close we were. My sister still speaks of her as her other little sister. So when a guy can come between two people that are as close as that, two people who are essentially sisters, then yes, it can happen to a grandmother. If she's not the mother of the parent of the children, because she doesn't have that biological claim that a mother has. I'm sure Cindy could at least put her foot down and say, no, I'm going to see my grandchildren. But for Belinda, she didn't have that option. Her son had completely dropped the bundle there, which basically gave her even less claim to those children, despite them being her own flesh and blood. If you've seen the videos of Malaya as a teenager, you will know she is a fairly soft-spoken, a fairly mousy kind of individual. I can't imagine her wanting to go behind Daniel's back to allow Belinda to see her grandchildren. Malaya had control there. Daniel had control there. Belinda didn't. Well, Malaya had so much control. Like I said, in those sort of relationships, it is the partner who is the controlling person there, the narcissist, who is very, very effective at cutting people off from their outside connections. Wow, she says, she thought, as she stepped inside to speak to Malaya. Everything she saw, from the junk-strewn yard to the cluttered kitchen, was the total opposite of the neat and tidy woman she used to know. And this, I'm just going to be quite upfront in this video. This is classic when it comes to a DV situation. Basically, what has happened here is that Malaya has clearly had 2 years of being brought down to her knees. She has been told she's a bad mother. She's been told that she's not looking after the house properly. She's been made to feel worthless. And this is a reflection of that. Sadly, I would imagine that she has been feeling quite isolated and depressed for quite some time. And no, she wouldn't have reached out to anyone, because basically when you're in a relationship like that, you are made to feel like a complete, utter failure. She would have felt too humiliated to reach out to anyone, because she would have been made to feel it was all her fault. This is the same story that you hear over and over again in these kinds of relationships. And I believe that not only was she getting this negative input from Daniel, but from what we've heard from Janie, she was getting it from her as well. She was basically, this guy took her to his mother's home, where basically they had complete control over Malaya's life, and it sounds like they completely did a number on her in terms of making her feel like she was just worthless. She was a bad mother. She was not even any good at housekeeping. Even though she'd heard it once before, she needed to hear it again. What happened, she asked. Malaya opened the low rumbling sliding patio door in the kitchen, demonstrating how she assumed the children quietly left the home while she and Daniel were sleeping. I'm going to add to that and say allegedly assumed, because I'm pretty certain that is not what occurred. Well, Malaya, Belinda recalled saying, "You're the mum, you know these kids better than anybody, so where do you feel they'd go? What would take their interest? What direction would they go?" She had no idea. This, of course, is the total opposite of Janie's claim that the children would always go up and play in that fort up in the woods. That day, as search and rescue teams tramped through the woods, rolling ankles and plucking ticks from their skin, Malaya stood on the side of the highway in front of a local television camera. "It's been raining and they're probably soaking wet, but with the sun today, I'm hopeful they're feeling warm," she said, swallowing back tears. "We're all filled with pain and sorrow because we just want them found. We want them home. Everyone loves them." That comment, "everyone loves them," is that something that I missed in the interview? Is it something that was edited out? Because I recall her saying, "we want them home," and then saying, "we want them home" again, because she didn't know what else to say. I don't recall the "everyone loves them." If she did say that, that's another red flag, because we can be pretty certain now that Janie really didn't think much of those children, and honestly, I don't believe that Daniel did either. And it bothers me here that it's a "we" statement again. We're all filled with pain and sorrow because we just want them found. As a mother, you would expect her to be saying how she is feeling at that point in time. But everything there is a "we" statement. Huge, huge red flag. She also took to Facebook pleading for police to issue an Amber Alert, a national public alert to help locate abducted children. "I want my babies home. My children are not shy to strangers and will go with anyone. They don't understand stranger danger," she wrote on May 3rd. Really, really pushing the abduction narrative, even though it's pretty damn clear that that is not what occurred. Daniel also pushed for such an alert, telling the Globe that abduction is a possibility, something he said he tried to raise early on with police, but he said they looked at him like he was crazy. When you look at the actions of the RCMP from day one, it seems pretty clear that they were seeing red flags almost immediately. So him pushing this whole abduction narrative, I'd imagine that at that point in time, they'd already decided that whatever occurred to the children had occurred on the property. So him pushing an abduction narrative was only making him look even more guilty. Perhaps it's because the home is so remote where few travel or have reason to pass by. Also, Nova Scotia Police require specific criteria to activate an Amber Alert, including a description of the child, abductor or vehicle, and reasonable grounds to believe an abduction has occurred. In this case, RCMP have repeatedly said they have no such evidence. And, come at me all you like, but for them to have said so early on in the case that it was not an abduction, that is a big call for them. That says that they are confident that they know what has occurred in terms of not an abduction, children did not wander off into the woods. They called back, or they scaled back the search 6 days in. That is another huge neon sign saying this is a criminal investigation. I asked them to go to every airport, all the airports, and intake for different provinces, PEI and New Brunswick, Daniel said, breaking down. Fake, crying. I think that was the moment, that was the first time I saw Daniel Martel. Straight away, I saw through the fake crying, I saw him peering through his hand at the interviewer to check if they were actually buying his little act, and that's when I'm sitting there going, oh no, this is not going to end well. Those children were not abducted. Those children did not wander off into the woods. This is a classic statement. They will go with anybody. because they're undiagnosed autistic. They will go with anybody. Well, if they're undiagnosed, then they're probably not ASD, and, well, maybe they are, but if they are ASD, then chances are they're going to be extremely wary of strangers as opposed to wanting to just go with anybody. But you cannot claim that they are ASD if you don't have a diagnosis. These are children who were behind in school for, in my opinion, trauma reasons. They had a not good home life, and that was the reason that they were behind their peers at school. Nothing to do with autism. As long as you offer them food or water, say, "I'll take you home to mum or dad," and they'll immediately get with them. He's speaking about them now like they are dogs. Offer them food and they'll go home with you. We all learnt when we were children, don't feed that stray dog or he'll come home with you. Or, when you're a kid and a dog turns up in the schoolyard and the teachers are going, don't feed it, it'll keep coming back. And the kids are going, yay, let's do that. As for these children, okay, maybe if they weren't getting decent food at home, maybe they could be lured with the offer of food if they were hungry enough. But again, not in this situation. You are in a rural location, you are in an isolated location. The chances of an abduction from that property are so itty-bitty. Now, I am kind of curious as to the source of the information that this journalist has got. Whether it is simply from Facebook conversations, simply from listening to that other channel, because, well, you would think that if he is part of a somewhat ethical newspaper that he would be careful about what he's reporting, so you would hope that he has verified it directly with someone, but still I have questions. It was late afternoon that Saturday when Daniel and Malaya's relatives began to turn on each other. In the doorway of the trailer, a discussion about meth use in the home led one of Malaya's family members to hurl an accusation that Daniel must have had something to do with the children's disappearance. The charge ignited a blaze of angry words. Eventually, Daniel's mother, Janie, ordered some of Malaya's family members off her property. I think I'd like to dig into the various accounts of that altercation, what's out there, see if I can find that middle ground. But like I said, hopefully, given that this newspaper is supposed to be one of those ethical ones that is responsible journalism, hopefully he's actually got this from a reliable source. Just up the road, Daniel and Malaya waited at the search and rescue headquarters for an update from police. It was around supper time when officers pointed out on maps where searchers had been. Suddenly Malaya said she wasn't feeling well. She walked out with Meadow on her hip. Now I have to say, I hope that conversation was actually recorded on people's body cams and multiple people's body cams, because I would like to think that their analysts would have actually taken the time to observe what was going on in that situation to see if that helped them come up with more questions to do with the investigation, to do with where the children could be, to do with Malaya's knowledge, all those sorts of things. It is somewhat telling that she sounds like she's had a full-blown panic attack when they're talking about locations on the maps where the searchers have been, because that is a reaction in terms of that she knows that the children are not coming back, in my opinion. Them talking about searching locations for the children, if, as we believe, someone took those children and hid them or buried them somewhere, then she would have been well aware of that and discussing search areas would have brought that right to the surface for her, and no doubt would have caused a major reaction. I don't believe that Malaya did want anything to happen to her children. I do believe that she cared for her children and that she was perhaps an unwilling participant in all of this. In the back of an ambulance, Malaya sobbed uncontrollably, her mother, registered nurse Cindy Murray, at her side. Daniel pled with Malaya to speak to her alone, but her mother stepped in front of him. Again, huge red flag with him wanting to speak to Malaya alone when she's in the middle of a full-blown panic attack, because that's what that was. If she was sobbing uncontrollably, it was a full-blown panic attack, or it was a full-blown grief reaction. And we've heard a few accounts of this, so I think this may well be what occurred. But Daniel wanting to speak to her alone, that is a massive, massive red flag, particularly given that, and I'm just going to call it, I have no doubt that he was controlling, manipulative, and that he was hoping, once again, to basically use a bit of manipulation to try and make sure that she didn't say anything that she should. Now, if I am correct about all this, I think that for Malaya, the best way forward, we've heard that she's got a lawyer, but honest to goodness, I think the best thing her lawyer could do right now would be to find the best clinical psychologist that they can, someone who can do a psychological assessment of Malaya in terms of discussing her life on that property, what things were like living with Daniel, her relationship with him, with her mother, his mother, what happened to the children, going on from there, covering all that, doing a really thorough psychological evaluation and getting in ahead of the game, coming up with a plea deal that basically tells all. I would imagine that if I'm correct about this, that Malaya would get a minimal sentence, possibly something where she did not end up having to do any jail time. Whereas if she continues to be silent and the investigation reaches a point where they have enough evidence to make arrests, by that stage it's going to be far too late to be trying to make any deals, and also far too late to be trying to bring in a clinical psychologist, because that would essentially be tainted. Anything that she were to do ahead of any potential arrests would be in her favour, because you bet that if someone doesn't talk, then they're all going to be locked up for quite some time. Hopefully. Cindy, get the F out of here, Daniel recalled saying. So clearly the stakes were high for him. He failed to recognise that this was Malaya's mother, who at that point in time she needed more than she needed Daniel. It says a lot about what's going on in the background here. The women hustled to Cindy's car, strapped in Meadow, and sped off down the dirt road. I love you, Daniel called out to his child through the rolled up back window. Well, that sounds like a complete utter load of BS. I would imagine he was probably still swearing and carrying on and was not thinking at that point in time about his daughter. It was the last time the couple was together. After that, Malaya blocked Daniel from contacting her and later changed her Facebook status to single. So I'm going to split this into two parts because I do want to give it the time it deserves. There is so much in here to absorb and I don't want to rush through it. So I will come back tomorrow with the second half of this. I will be putting out another video later on today talking about Jaden Spicer with information that I've shared with my members, but which is out there publicly now, so I will discuss it in a public video. But in terms of Lily and Jack, I will come back with the second half of this video tomorrow. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button and please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.